Hello, this is Corey Durbin, CEO of SHARx, and this is the Rising Tides podcast. Each week, I have the privilege of speaking with influential athletes about their rise to fame, the dedication to their sport, and what it takes to be successful. Let's dive in. Well, good morning, Heath. It's great to see you today. How are you today?
Hey, doing great, Corey. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have you with us today and to really have you part of Rising Tides and the Army that has kind of become this grassroots movement in the prescription world. And I'm really glad we get to catch up today.
Well, the great thing is, Corey, I'm glad to be a part of it because you're changing so many people's lives and the opportunities that you're, helping them get prescription medication for a much lower rate, certainly within the business world. And so oftentimes you look at it as it does impact not only you as an individual when you're able to get the prescription drugs at a much lower rate, but also it's your colleagues in the workplace, right? I mean, if you lower the prescription costs, it actually lowers it for everyone in the workplace. So, hats off to you and the team. I've been so excited working for you guys for the last few months and really getting to know you guys not only on a professional level, but certainly getting to know you guys on a personal level. I'm glad to be a part of the team.
That means a lot, and it's interesting how these things evolve. And when you look back at where you started, and even you personally, and how things evolve in your own life, and you've got a son and daughter at UT now, don't you?
I do. It's really incredible. We moved from North Carolina in 22, a year after my son had transferred from Appalachian State, where he was a quarterback, to UT. And I mean, what a blessing for him to be able to play with some incredible coaches and play with the best fans in the world. And so we call it moving back home, because this is where Nicole and I started when we got married, right? During my NFL days, and we both went to the University of Tennessee. We were, high school sweethearts. And although we, dated for 7.5 years, we weren't in the same town, but for one semester of college. So,
wow.
I left college early and turned pro. And, now to get to see my son and daughter, be on the field with Alum being on the dance team, Navy being a quarterback there, playing some special teams. It's just really remarkable to be able to see both of them fulfill their childhood dreams, is just the way that Nicole and I were able to fulfill ours going to Tennessee.
Yeah, well, to the degree that you can you describe how it's been for Navy just going back to UT with the success that you had there? And some of, I know that 93 team, some of them consider one of the best teams ever at UT, even though there were a couple losses you wish you had back, right? But so what's it been like for him going back?
I think it's been positive. I think part of it is a name ID. The Shuler name at the University of Tennessee. We've had more people run through the T with the last name Shuler, almost double than any other family in our school history. And so it has been awesome for him. And he's getting to experience what we knew, right? Because most of his life, Tennessee hadn't been playing well. And so now he's getting to experience it firsthand, what it is to be successful, and the Vols are playing well and recruiting is going exceptionally well. So those type things are all falling in line. And I think pretty shortly we'll win the national championship. I truly do. And probably the greatest thing of all is, when he was being recruited after he got in the portal, the coaches were sincere about they were recruiting him, not because he was my son. They was recruiting him, and I think that has certainly lived up to the expectations I think that he felt that it would be, and the way they treat him. And Coach Joey Halsley is just an incredible man that spends a lot of time with my son and mentoring him as the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. And then when you got a head coach like Josh Heupel, he is the true commander in chief there with the team, and what he brings to the table. It's a place that you want, it's a place you want your son to be involved in, and to be mentored by really great individuals and great men.
Well, and as a Missouri guy, when Josh Heupel left, it was a little bit of heartbreaking, because you knew how good that offense and what an offensive mind he is and was, and how the trajectory of where that program was going, and they're on a good track now, but he had it just really kind of on the rise there with Drew Lock. So that's an awesome place for your son to be. And I've had the fortune of going to a few games in Knoxville, and
Yeah.
again, as a Missouri guy, you go into Knoxville and you're like, whoa, this is what a college football experience. So what was it like?
Drinkwitz is doing a great job. That's who Navy felt. I mean, that's who recruited him out of high school. Drink recruited him at Appalachian State, and then like 4 days before the national letter of intent was signed, he leaves and go to Missouri. It was like my son went like from a high to like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And then the quarterback coach that he was so close to, Coach Riley, he leaves and goes. And so my son, I just think really never felt like, there was the right home was there because the coaching staff had just left. And so it was a dream come true for him to be there. And I can't wait to hopefully you get a chance to come watch a game this year and we'll get to watch it together.
I hope so. Yeah. So but the college, well, your daughter, she's at UT also. Is she younger?
She's on the dance team.
And she's on the dance team there.
Yeah.
So you're really at the university quite a bit still.
Oh my goodness. I'm there. I am literally on campus probably 2 or 3 times a week. I think it just, just the involvement, and I love it. I'm involved in the Baker School there because of my political background. Howard Baker has the public policy, and it's just been, it's been really great to be, on campus. Got to speak to the team about a week ago. So, just to be around and being involved, it's so special, and the openness and the welcomeness that that not only the football, but all across the board in all sports. I mean, it's just Danny White and the Chancellor Plowman has done a phenomenal job, and I think it really kind of goes all the way to the very top with our president of the university systems. I mean, it's just been awesome to be able to see a team work, together the way they have, and so it's just been it's truly changed our university. When you get the right people in place, good things happen.
You are a great ambassador for the school, and of course, we know you are and will be for SHARx and for Rising Tides. And so that football experience, that game day experience, what was that like for you in Knoxville? Because again, as a fan, I don't know that there are any. It's got to be in the top 5 when that place is rocking on a Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, they want to talk about LSU and Death Valley. I don't know. I played there, and I don't know, it's because we just we had a really good outing that day. It was a pretty quiet stadium to play. But I don't know how people play at Tennessee. Offensively, it's just so loud for the opposing team. It's just really, really challenging. So, yeah, I mean, it's I love the campus, and I love the experience that it brings to the students and the athletes, and then the whole community involved, and the whole state, and the surrounding communities. I mean, growing up in Western North Carolina, there's so many Tennessee fans because that's the radio stations you got, and in some cases, even the TV stations.
So Bryson City, North Carolina, that's where you grew up, I guess, and played your high school football and won 2 state championships.
3.
I had read both, and I just wasn't sure which was right. But so 3, that's amazing. And that's a fairly small town. What, 1,600 people live in Bryson City?
Yeah, it's really small. So most of the Swain County is 83% of the land is the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So it's the North Carolina entrance to the park, where you have Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge as the entrance to the Tennessee side. Pretty remarkable of a small community kind of coming together, and athletics is at the very top. I mean, I was a mile from my high school, a mile from my church growing up as a kid. So past the church to go to school, it was just that small. There's 88 in my senior class. I had a remarkable senior class. Just, had Navy SEAL, Green Beret, an Olympian, and I think we had somewhere, in the 20s, I want to say it was 26, 27 out of the 88 students actually went into the military.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're remote, ways away from any military base. So it wasn't like it was family tradition. It was more about, giving back to the community. I think that, you kind of get that sense when you grow up at that community, what it is to, to be actively involved in the community, be a part of it, make, leave things better than you found it, that sort of stuff.
We've got some retired Navy SEALs in our family,
Yeah.
one in particular, and fairly recent. And is there a group of people more amazing
Oh, no.
than the SEALs?
Yeah, my one of my best friends in high school, and he was my wide receiver, Marty Burns, Navy SEAL, spent time obviously in San Diego, but they get pretty good when they go to Dam Neck. When they report to Dam Neck, then that's the elite of the elite. And him having the opportunity to go there and train and do the things that he did, and when I was in office, I could actually find out some of the things that he was up to because of my clearances. But he obviously traveled the world, got to see a lot, and some stuff that I'm sure it's challenging for him even today. Those individuals see a lot in this world, especially in time of war.
I admire the heck out of our military, and certainly the SEALs in particular. And for a town like Bryson City, I don't know if it's known as a football factory or not yet, but having produced folks like when you came out of there, and you've got the SEALs and the people who went on to the success that they had, it's got to be a source of great pride for
it is. And I think that was a great, I think that was kind of is indicative of the community. It is about pride. One of my other best friends, that we were all classmates. When you saw one, you saw 4 or 5 of us, and the other was an Olympian. I mean, just
wow.
He was I think he is 6 or 7 time world champion in kayaking. Our hometown just got another gold medalist again in kayaking. A lady who just won in the Summer Olympics, who was a medalist. And so it's just amazing to be able to see a small community like that be able to produce with less than 10,000 people, or right at 10,000 people now in the community, to be able to see, the numbers of, athletes and people that have gone on and do some pretty incredible stuff. And I think it just comes, that is a tradition, and that's what's expected. Our motto in our hometown is our school motto is our best and then some. And I think it's one of the greatest mottos I've ever heard. Matter of fact, I'm giving a speech tonight, and that's what I'm going to talk about, is our best and then some.
Love it. Love it. Love to hear a copy of that one.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing that one. So, Bryson City, if we fast forward to Congress,
yes,
you served 3 terms, I believe.
Yes.
3 terms?
3 terms, yes.
And you sponsored or wrote some legislation, and at least more than one regarding veterans, military.
Actually, the VA. I mean, it was the Vietnam veterans had never been, formally recognized for their day. And so although it's not a national holiday, but there is an actual day that recognize, I think it's in March, that actually recognizes as Vietnam Veterans Day. And so that was one of the pieces of legislation that we was able to introduce and get passed, and bipartisan. Matter of fact, it was unanimous consent, both in the House and in the Senate, and signed by the president.
Was there also another piece of legislation regarding homeless vets, and that, or was that something that was proposed?
So I was a subcommittee chairman in the Small Business Committee, and a lot of the things that we was able to do is to help provide some funding for them through the Small Business Administration, to be able to get our veterans an opportunity, if they want to start their own business, some opportunities through that. So it was some great legislation. It was a part of a much larger bill that we're able to put together, that had a lot of, the great part is, I always pride myself in, you don't see it these days as much as, everything I wanted to do is do it in a bipartisan way, to do it. Both Democrats and Republicans are working together for the same common goal, settle, the differences. Sometimes they may have it a little bit, but, the compromise in itself was, actually crafted and made the legislation always better. So there's some very intelligent, very bright people in Congress, and when you work with them in an open and honest manner, you get that in return. And so I was able to make a lot of good policies, through the working with the SBA and our veterans.
We kind of live in a time where it seems like everything's so polarized.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure that the average person is like that. I'd like to believe that more folks are like, have the mindset like you, like, we might not agree on everything. And at
Sure.
the end of the day, you're probably not all right on everything, nor am I, one side or the other. And so there's got to be a way we can figure out what's the really most important thing on your side of the table, my side of the table, and how do we work together so everybody feels like
Yeah,
maybe you didn't get everything or get everything you want, but it's a win.
it is. I think it's like, look, my wife and I have been married 26 years. We dated 7 years, 7.5 years prior to that. We don't always agree on everything. But in
Hmm.
order to make our family function the way it should, is we have to have compromise. And sometimes we agree to disagree and move on. And sometimes we, compromise in the fact that that doesn't compromise your beliefs. And, when I was in Congress, or your values, but you actually are able to get, I mean, sometimes there was some great pieces like, wow, I never thought about that. So let's
Yeah.
put that in. And unfortunately, I think what's happening in today's society is and there's a lot when it comes to Congress. We could probably spend an entire, week talking about the problems in Washington. But I think the real problem is people are there for the wrong reasons. And I always looked at it at that, even when the time that I was there, I felt that there was three types of members of Congress. There was a third of the members of Congress that were there for all the right reasons, right? Those were the
Hmm.
individuals that were really want to get something done. Now, just because you live in Western North Carolina, where I was representing, may be totally different than parts of California, but that's okay. I at least started to understand that there were differences of opinions, but respectful opinions. And then there was a third that were there for greed and power. I mean,
Hmm.
truly, they were there for greed and power. I mean, they love the attention, they love the power that it represents, and they become greedy based upon getting on TV. And then the other third, it's the only thing they could ever do in life. I mean, you wouldn't hire them to run a business because they've been a county commissioner, a state legislature, and then ultimately they were in Congress. So, they never really, been involved in the business world and understand the things that makes our country go around. And that's on both sides of the aisle. And I think what has happened is those people that are there for all the right reasons, those numbers have gotten less and less. I'll never forget, I was obviously a Blue Dog Democrat, and was I chaired co-chaired the Blue Dogs, and which was a great affiliation and a group of very like-minded individuals. And we always were looking to, on both sides of the aisle, to get compromise and pass legislation. And we were about fiscal responsibility. If you looked at
Hmm.
it, we wanted a strong national defense, and we wanted fiscal responsibility. And so having those individuals, those numbers, there was 52 of us at one time, and now there's less than a dozen, that are members of the Blue Dog Caucus. And I think our counterparts on the Republican side, they went from about 50 members of what's called the Tuesday group. It's because they met on Tuesday, so they called themselves the Tuesday group. And and they're like even less than a dozen too. And so it's a very small group of individuals that I would consider that represents 80% of where America is, and that's in the middle. You got the 10% fringe and extremists on both sides of the political spectrum, but most of us are 80% in the middle. And that's why I kind of find myself, more as an independent these days than any, political fascia. These members got to understand that they pledge allegiance to the American flag and quit pledging allegiance and the support to any political
To a
party or any
party, yeah.
political individual.
Right. I wish we could remove the R and the D from everybody's
I
name
agree.
come
Yes.
election time, and you actually have to learn what they stand for,
Yep.
and you're
That's right.
voting for the name, the person, and whether what party that they're in, and I think it would actually free up people in Congress and the Senate to
It
vote
would.
for what they really believe in, because it's not, am I
Yeah,
doing what I
I love
think my
this.
party wants
When
me
I
to do?
left Congress, and I had no idea that this was it, but the National Journal wrote an article when I announced that I was retiring from Congress. And, part of it was I always said I'd never be a career politician. But I actually, through that process, I voted 50% of the time with Democrats and 50% of the time with Republicans. And it wasn't, 51, 49. It was 50-50 with all the votes that I cast in all of Congress. And I always felt like at least I was doing it right. And, and there was one vote that I did not do a good enough job of constituency outreach, and it become a political vote. And to this day, of all the hundreds and hundreds of votes that I cast, I really felt that there was one that I probably voted on it based upon politics instead of what I really believe. And to this day, it's kind of like the bad play in football, right? You remember the bad plays a whole lot more than you remember the touchdowns. And that was a bad play on my part. And I regret that, still to this day.
Yeah, well, it's easy for us to beat ourselves up, and we can all tend to focus on those things that we regret, but we don't. Unless you want to talk about what that specific thing is, we'll go on. But
I mean, it was a very it was the DREAM Act, where students that were not born in the United States have an opportunity to get some, federal funding for colleges and scholarships and that sort of stuff. And, I voted the wrong way. I voted no, to not give them that opportunity. And I had met with a young lady, an incredible soccer player, had opportunities to go to play college. And because of my vote and my other colleagues, she never got that opportunity. And I'll never forget it. It breaks my heart still to this day. I watched her. I went through a drive-through at the McDonald's, and here was a girl that was like straight A student, and went through the drive-through at McDonald's, headed to Washington D.C. And she waited on me, and she said she took my, she had taken my order and taken my my money, and she says, "Congressman, it's so good to see you again." And it broke my heart because this girl could have played anywhere she wanted to in college, and I voted wrong, and the sad part is that was, only a couple of months before I left, and never had the opportunity to vote on that piece of legislation ever again. And, I know what it meant for me and my family, for my brother and I to go play college ball with our parents not having, the money to send us to school. And I wish I had that one over again. It still haunts me to this day.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I can tell how much it means to you, and I believe that there will be other opportunity even for her, of course. And when you look at it, this creates this whole discussion around, immigration and illegal immigration. And I'm not.
She was here at 4 months old. She was in the United States.
No. The point is, we should be a place where when somebody's here legally, that we help create opportunity. And so there's a fine line between just open borders and let's make sure that this is a place where when people come that we've created opportunities. So I
productive citizens, give back,
100%. Yeah, 100%. Well, to take a step back before we go forward, congrats on, 26 years of marriage. I'm at 28. So if you ever need
I love advice.
I mean, I got a lot of advice I can give you, and my wife would be quick to tell you that 28 years feels just like 5 minutes underwater for her. But so, no, it's an accomplishment, right? Because it takes a lot to work and navigate a relationship.
It does.
For 26 years, for 28 years, for 10 years, and people have gotten too quick to move on or think, well, the grass is greener somewhere else, and it just isn't. And keeping the family unit together is vital. And the reason I kind of jokingly took a step back was one of the things I wanted to ask you about was this Child Protection Act, because one of my best friends in the world is a guy named Pat Bradley. Pat runs Crisis Aid International in St. Louis, and the organization that does human trafficking relief. They started in Ethiopia. He started the organization prior to that, but that's where they really started this movement on helping rescue young girls, young women from trafficking, from slavery, essentially. And now they've got a lot of branches in the U.S. So I wanted to just ask you about that because my attention was drawn to that.
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of started with one of my dear friends, who was he was a former wildlife officer, and he worked really closely with the missing and exploited children. And he kind of brought it to my attention, from a constituent, right? Constituent brings this to you and you start to realize. And I started looking into the problems and issues that was happening, the dark web and the things that, was just the way our young children were just exploited and the things that were happening. I can't even begin to tell you the horror stories from parents, of what had happened. And then, one, to be able to look at their children online and trying to figure out where in the world are they, to knowing that they exist and how do they get to them, and how they were, kidnapped and now they're sex, they're in the sex slaves and people from all over the world. And it was just crushing. So, we were able to give a lot of funding to be able to help not only from the FBI standpoint and all the incredible work that they do, but even all the way down to our local sheriff and police departments to be able to give them the resources that they can help, because it really starts locally, right? It really starts on a local level to, how do you identify the problem? How do you identify? And then most importantly is to be able to have those resources to go into the schools and to talk about, a dedicated officer. And in a lot of those areas that they go into the schools and talk about, what to watch out for, what do they say, meeting up with someone that you don't know, that you just, met online, those type of problems. And so we needed those resources to be able to educate really the youth. And ironically enough, you can't even believe that sometimes that the parents gave access, unfeathered access, to a computer to a 10-year-old. And that's the age that, that really young age was the ones that was the most vulnerable, and the ones that were, from a predator standpoint, that were sought after the most.
Did you see Sound of Freedom?
I did not know.
Yeah, it's a fairly recent movie that is a, true to life portrayal of, a former Homeland Security agent that said, became aware of some children that were basically brought into the U.S. And it's a pretty riveting story, and it sheds a lot of light on the depravity that's going on. And there's a lot of really great people in the FBI, for instance, and in these, in the police force, in some more social worker kind of jobs that really want to make a difference. And so these resources are critical to addressing that problem. And as I saw, you also sponsored some healthcare bills. So it seems like, getting into kind of the heart of SHARx, I think hopefully one of the reasons you're drawn to us is the healthcare agenda. Agenda may be the wrong word, but focus.
Yeah. I think, I took a very, strong stance on how we can actually fix kind of some of the healthcare problems and issues that we had. And, I was there during the Affordable Care Act. I felt like there was some more things that we needed to do to fix the problem. And so, we tried to work through those processes. Unfortunately, at that time, the cake had been baked and they were ready to serve the dessert, and I wasn't ready to vote and cast my vote that way. I really felt that it is that I wanted everyone to have access to affordable health care, But I think there was so many things that were kind of the gaps that were missing, that when I got called to the Oval Office, and I had my, one-on-one with President Obama, and I've got a lot of respect for him. I mean, I think he's just conducted himself in an incredible manner. And, he was, doing the best he possibly can with having to deal with Congress, to try to, thread the needle. And, he didn't get everything in the bill that he wanted either, and, but I was willing to say, hey, let's take a step back. But at that time they just said, hey, we're too close to the finish line. We can't take a step back to fix everything. We can fix it as we go along. I think the unfortunate thing is, it's companies like SHARx has really stepped up to the plate, and kind of, those missing pieces, to legislation to be able to help, especially with there's like 17 of the highest prescription drug medications that is,
yeah, the top 17 are
top
the
17
US spend more than the rest of the world combined.
The rest of the world combined
by double.
So those are the things that were not sought in those in that legislation. But it's great that a company has stepped up and said, hey, we need to help. We need to help companies, we need to help individuals, and we need to help get these prices at a lower and more affordable price. And that could have been done in legislation, but the way I look at it is, we're setting in the forefront of that, and we're actually making a huge difference in people's lives. And so I really feel that because of my relationship with SHARx, it's really been, I'm still giving back and I'm still serving the community. And it's not often you get to do that in a company, right? It's often you get to do that. And so I'm very grateful that I still feel like I'm serving a community by, putting the voice out, that the opportunity, and talking to business owners and telling them, so, hey, have you looked at this? Look at your, prescription drug plans. And there's starting to be a lot of attention drawn to that. And we're starting to see the success. So when you have that conversation now with businesses, are like, really? That's who I've been hearing about. And so then it kind of continues to multiply, through the business world, and them understanding that they can save money and obviously save not only one individual's life, but it can be, some people don't take the drugs because it's too expensive and it costs them their lives. And I'm just unfortunate that we live in a society that people have to make choices, food or prescription drugs, or rent. And this has given a lot of employees and businesses and individuals across this country an opportunity that they don't have to make that choice.
And as you alluded to, our vision, as you know, is healthcare that works for everyone.
Yeah.
And people ask, what does SHARC stand for? And there's been all this kind of sometimes bloggers, well, SHARC is this predatory idea of, preying on blah, blah, blah. Well, SHARC is simplifying healthcare access, because the average American doesn't really have a seat at the table, because it's all about how the drug manufacturer makes money, or the PBM, or the insurance company. And I even say this, when you think about the ACA, good, bad, or indifferent, there was a cap put on insurance companies, the margin that they could make, right. And it was 15 or 20%, depending on the size of the employer group. Well, in theory, that sounds great. And what it does is it promotes more claims. Because if you charge $200 a month in premium and you can make 20%, then your margin is $40, right?
That's right.
But if you have a lot of claims as an employer, as an insurance company, and you can underwrite for it, and you say, you know what, we need $1,000 a month per person on your group. Well, your margin just went up significantly.
Yeah, 20% of $1,000 is a lot better than 20%.
200 instead of 40,
200.
right? So it doesn't make sense. We're incenting the wrong thing, and there's a lot of players that don't add value to the system, that are just have their hands in the cookie jar. So it's not always the manufacturer, it's not always the insurance company, right. It's not always. so there's a little bit that we can collectively work on and make a big difference. And so that's the direction we continue to go down. You've had some interaction with Brock Osweiler, one of our other
Yes.
ambassadors. And do you want to talk about that a little bit? And
Yeah, it was great. I got to meet Brock. He was working out at IMG, and my son was just learning to play quarterback, and so we went and spent a week at camp at IMG and spent some time there. When I was in the league, I was actually represented by IMG. That ultimately Tom Connon went to Creative Artists after that. He took the group to them, and so I got to go to IMG before. It was really more of still a tennis school, and then now what it's turned into. And so I wanted my son to experience that. So we went there, and Tommy Langford was one of the coaches there that has become one of my best friends in the world, and ultimately became the coach at Christ School where my son was at. So he left IMG as a linebacker coach and become the head coach at Christ School in Asheville, North Carolina. And so at that time, he was working out Brock, so we got to see him, and it was just awesome to see a guy like Brock spend some time with the young quarterbacks and say hello and watch them throw the ball back and forth with them. That's awesome. When you see somebody that at such a high level playing so well, giving back to that next generation of quarterbacks. So I always was excited when every time I'd watch him play, it's like, that guy is a quality human being.
You guys had some parallels in your career, at least in my mind, the way I see it. And I mean, you had a pretty meteoric rise at UT. You finished second in the Heisman Trophy balloting in 93. Yes. And so you really, and you both left after with a season of eligibility left, right?
Yes, that's right.
So I don't know, we shift for a few minutes into the NFL conversation. And well, even if you start sort of that 93 season,
right,
and where you went mentally to the success and how good you guys were at UT to saying, okay, I think it's time to explore the NFL waters.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of it was different times at that point. I mean, I had every reason to want to stay at Tennessee. I felt like we was going to have one of the best seasons ever going into 94. My brother had just finished his freshman year, got a couple of games he got to start. He was a wide receiver at UT. Threw him several passes, but never got to throw him a touchdown pass. Matter of fact, one of my good friends, Jerry Colquitt, who was also the backup, I think he threw 2 or 3 touchdown passes that year. So I never got the chance to throw to my brother a touchdown in college. I did in high school, but my now wife, but at the time was my girlfriend. Was in school there, but it was so hard and challenging. And at the time, I didn't let it be known publicly. But as you get older and you start to figure things out, and I didn't want to embarrass my parents, but I couldn't go ask them to be able to protect the value of what you could make in the NFL. I'd have to get a Lloyd's of London, insurance policy, and it's so that was to manage the risk in order if something were to go wrong.
Right.
And at that point in time, I mean, I couldn't ask my parents to go put a second mortgage on their home.
Yeah.
My dad was a mailman growing up. My mom, she helped run the Swain County Youth Athletic Association. So she was a volunteer, worked, 50, 60 hours a week and all the things that she did. And so, we just didn't have the money to be able to pay that. And so I really felt that there was no choice, and so I turned pro and went to the Redskins, and the place I really wanted to go. I was a Redskin fan growing up. I loved to watch Joe Theismann and John Riggins and Art Monk, and
man, they were good
Darryl
teams.
Green, and got to play with Darryl Green, and it couldn't have been and Jim Lachey was my left tackle, and couldn't have been a better situation. And I felt like Troy Aikman had just come off an incredible winning Super Bowls and playing at that time probably the best quarterback in the league. And, so his offensive coordinator, quarterback coach is going to be mine. And it was good. It was challenging. We started, I think, 3 or 4 rookies that year. So it was probably not the best. We weren't prepared. We had a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. Everybody was rookie. We started 3 or 4. Jim Lachey goes down. And so we just had a challenge. And it just, in my whole career, it felt like high school, college had been kind of a paved road. And when it wasn't just a gravel road. It was, you had to put it in 4-wheel drive. It was a challenging ups and downs. And, but I say this now, at the time I wondered just why on earth I'm having to go through this. At times I felt like, gosh, I may never throw another ball again,
Yeah.
It kind of started wearing on me mentally. And, man has a plan, right? But God laughs, right? And I really felt like, I went there and I had the incredible opportunity to play for Mike Ditka, who I absolutely adore. I think he's one of the greatest coaches ever. Loved Coach Ditka. Played for him. I dislocated all 5 toes on my left foot in the middle of a game.
Oh no!
That ultimately ended up, costing me my career. But the last 2 games, I as a starter, we won back to back. And it couldn't have been a better end if you're going to end on 2 wins back to back. And ultimately ended up going out to Oakland, hopefully being able to, to rehab, get my foot back in condition, and spent some time with John Gruden. And when you're talking about an offensive genius, I learned more about football in the 6 months that I was with John Gruden than I had learned my entire football career combined. It was, I wish I would have been with him from the very beginning, and maybe it would have been a different story. I think he understood me. I understood him. Rich Gannon was the starting quarterback at the time. Wade Wilson was the other backup quarterback, and it was a great. Gary Stevens was our quarterback coach. Could not have been a better situation, but unfortunately, if you can't run and you can't move your toes, then I begged the doctors to cut my toes off. If they'll just cut them off, and I would.
Wow.
I felt like I could, and the doctor looked at me and said, will have no balance, no nothing. And I didn't have any balance, still don't have any balance anyways, but.
Well, you were an absolutely amazing athlete, and so it had to feel like you lost some of your superpowers when
if I didn't have my legs and I just, I could throw the ball. I had a really strong arm, but my deal was to be able to get out of the pocket and finally get in the West Coast system where I had been in this, the Don Coryell was a great system, Ernie Zampese, Norv Turner. Those were great systems for a straight drop back, non-mobile quarterback, right? But put those, but my ability had been to run the ball, run, get out of the pocket. Kind of like a Steve Young in that sense, is to run, scramble, throw the ball, kind of like the way quarterbacks are now. At that point in time, they kept saying, stay in the pocket. And that was just kind of really defeating the purpose for drafting me, I believe.
Yeah, well, that nowadays it seems like the offenses, they want that quarterback to be able to put that extra pressure on that defense.
That's right.
And so it would fall in line with perfectly how the game is played today. And back when you were traded from the Redskins, right? You have an option. Did Charlie Casserly give you an option to go to Green Bay?
He did.
Because Favre was there at the time,
you've
right?
done some great insight. Yeah, I actually reached out to so I was an unrestricted free agent, and so I got to choose where I wanted to go.
Okay.
And how that really went was I went to Green Bay, and that was a really good spot. And probably later in life, I figured out that it was, I went to Norv and I said, look, I've got 2 options. I can go and compete with Jim Everett, older quarterback, kind of the latter part of his career. When we had never had that quarterback, at Washington, it was all a bunch of young guys, Trent Green, Gus Frerotte, and myself. And so, Pat O'Hara was there, been an older guy. And, so, it wasn't like we had a lot of depth in that room that had a lot of experience in the NFL. And so I asked Norv, I said, look, I can go be Brett's backup, or I can go compete for the job in New Orleans. And he goes, Heath, you're a starter. You're not a backup. And so I went to New Orleans, and because of his, really kind of that recommendation from a true coach and who understands, he said, you're not a backup, you're a starter. So I did, and got the opportunity to start, and hurt my foot. And that was it. But it was some, playing with Brett probably would have been a pretty cool place,
Well, hindsight's 2020, and still, I think we are where we're supposed to be, and sometimes
Absolutely.
we don't necessarily like how we got there. But
I mean, as much as I love my NFL days, and that was my childhood dream, was to play in the NFL. I told my parents when I was in the 5th grade I would play in the NFL. In the 5th grade, I told them I would play in the NFL. Now, I didn't tell them I'd play quarterback. I really wanted to be the tailback, but I ended up, I told them that's what I wanted to do. That was my childhood dream. I got to fulfill that. But to be honest with you, the real job that I had that was, outside of being a husband and a parent, the job that was without a doubt was more important than playing the NFL was being in Congress. That was without a doubt. I know it doesn't seem to have its, reputation, that it did during that time, but that was a very important job, and so I think it really told me that was God's plan to put me in Congress, not to play in the NFL.
Well, even you could have run for a 4th term, right? And as I recall, you really took a step back and said, time for me to focus on family a little bit right now.
Yeah, my kids were 2 and 5, and it was actually easy. It was much easier for me at 2 and 5. I don't know if my wife would tell you that 2 and 5.
Probably not.
It was easy, but it was easier at that point in time because, they got to come and go back and forth from DC with me. We lived in DC for an entire year. The kids lived there. I went back and forth. We would go back and forth together, but oftentimes we'd get our weekends together if we stayed in DC. And that would happen often. If we had a Friday, and we had a Monday, then that weekend I wouldn't go home. I would stay, and, by the time I got in Friday afternoon, maybe see constituents on Saturday, I would fly back up on Sunday. So it wasn't worth, doing that. So I got to spend a lot of time with my family. But as time went on, and, when you're in year 4, and, the kids were missing their dad, and I literally have the voicemail on my phone that I have saved, and I'll never, it was January 25th of 2012. And it was a voicemail that my daughter left me. And she told me to come home. Dad, when are you coming home? And so I was.
You still have it?
I still have it on my phone. It's still on my phone. So next time we're together, I'll let you listen. It's the sweetest call ever. Daddy, I can't wait till you get home. I love you so much. I mean, it was one of those that were just, I'll never erase erase that voicemail.
Those voices fade too fast, and unfortunately we have, easier at the time. You and I, parents, were basically the same age.
Yes.
A lot easier to have those memories because we're with the phones we've had and to record those things. So I don't do a lot of looking back. I'm more of a look forward guy, but I still value those. And I know I want to, get close to wrapping up here because I want to be respectful of your time. And it's in a couple thoughts as we close. You and Brock have a connection. Both have a pretty close connection to Peyton Manning.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's kind of interesting. How is that? Having him essentially follow you, right? I mean, he had to navigated around a couple different. That first season was a little rough for him, but Todd Helton and I think maybe Colquitt, but
Jerry, and so that when I left, I felt like I left the team in incredible hands with Jerry Colquitt, and I think there was a lot of people disappointed, Tennessee fans disappointed that I was leaving, but the first series of the first game of the season, Jerry Colquitt goes down with a knee injury, and it was almost like that could have been Heath. Right. It could have been me there. And it was Jerry, and I absolutely love Jerry Colquitt I mean, he is one of the greatest guys in the world. I'll never forget. We're competing for the job my sophomore year. He's a redshirt sophomore. I'm a sophomore. He has a year in the when you're a freshman and you got a fifth-year senior as quarterback, Andy Kelly's a quarterback. I promise you, it wasn't like today. You didn't get any attention, right? I mean, they didn't pay no attention to you. It was, you better,
He's
you better
driving that bus. Andy Kelly's driving that bus that year.
Yeah, so. He is driving. He's a fifth-year senior, so they were doing things as a fifth-year senior should do, right? I'll never forget Jerry Colquitt and I are competing for the job. We're actually roommates. And I'll never forget, we were sitting there studying the plays, during fall camp. And he looked at me and goes, "Hey, remember the play?" And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "Here's the way I think of that play." And he coached me. And then it was like another play and another play and another play. And he was coaching me, how he saw it and how he looked at it. And Jerry was a very bright guy. And, we're competing for the job, but yet he's trying to help me improve my craft. And about 5 years ago, I called Jerry. I said, "Hey, Jerry, I owe you the biggest thank you in the world. If it weren't for you, I would have never probably played, but I have to ask you why you actually helped me when we're competing." He says, "Because I love Tennessee that much, and I knew that if you were the starting quarterback, we were going to be in great hands." And I was like, man, that is the most selfless thing I've ever seen in my life. That Jerry Colquitt helped me through that process. And so, that was really one of those things you look back in your life. So Jerry, was there. I got to take Peyton out on his recruiting trip when he come to UT. So, I mean, my brother was his wide receiver. So there was a lot of commonality. So Jerry was a starting quarterback. Todd Helton, who's my neighbor. Todd and I are neighbors, just inducted to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Great guy, incredible, obviously, baseball player, one of the greatest of all times. And, that what a room we had, right? And of course, they had a great room, and they had a guy named Brandon Stewart to ultimately end up playing at Texas A&M, who's a great quarterback.
Yeah,
his skill set and ours kind of lined up. And at that time, Peyton was a sought after, no doubt, high school, but he wasn't Brandon Stewart, who I think at the time was the number one quarterback. So, that you get a Brandon Stewart, the number one quarterback, and Peyton obviously in the top 10 quarterbacks in high school, you get an opportunity that they both play at the same school. And then Jerry goes down. Todd's like, "Hey, this is not me. I'm not going to play football my life. I'm going to be playing baseball." He got a little dinged up that first game against UCLA when Jerry got hurt. And so those two freshman quarterbacks got an opportunity to, to compete for the job and went back and forth. And then ultimately the rest is history when you get one of the all-time greats, Peyton Manning, takes the helm and runs it for the next 4 years.
He did okay after that, didn't he? So.
He did really well. He sure did.
Well, it's Brock talks about that connection and how highly he thinks of Peyton and that time, and we shared it on the last one. But at the end of the day, this is what we do is about helping people. I love hearing your heart and the stories, and having the connection with Jerry, right, and his willingness to, it's not always about ourselves, and there's a time where you got to give sometimes without the expectation of something in return. And at the end of the day, I think SHARx is about that. And
absolutely
having somebody like you who really is a uniter, and I mean this with all sincerity and how much I respect the idea and the intentionality behind trying to bring people together. Well, we can talk some more about some of these things later. And I think it'll be interesting conversation, some of the other stories you shared with me. But that's what this movement is all about. Like,
absolutely.
If all we do is get this 422% more that Americans pay in drug costs down, and SHARx is no longer in business 5 years from now because nobody needs us, great. That will have been worth it in the end. And I really believe your involvement, Brock's involvement, some others that are getting involved are going to help stir that kind of
Yes.
pot. So
Well,
thank you.
Those opportunities, you're able to give back and make a difference in people's lives. And sometimes if you just change the difference of one person's life, the impact is far greater than we may never, ever know what that impact was to their life. And so at the end of the day, it's not about revenue. It's not about sales. It's about making an impact and a difference in people's lives, because those are the things that become, they can transform to the next generation, where people, have a little extra spending money, that they're not, they're not such at a poverty level based upon the drug costs are so high.
Right. Yeah. And it was a slow dance. I mean, our conversations and leading up to, your involvement as an ambassador, true with Brock. I mean, he's been a friend for a couple of years up where I live here, and it's sort of happening organically. Like, it's not like he's saying, I need to make some money from you, because we pay a little bit for his time, your time, which you deserve to get paid for your time, but it's not a lot. I'll be the first to admit. And I love that the heart behind it is, let's grow this so that it makes a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, that's so true. Well said, my friend.
I appreciate your time, Heath. It was great to catch up with you. I hope we get to do it again soon. Good luck with the speech tonight. Sure, it'll go great.
Yes, it should be interesting. Yes.
One of these days we'll get to talk about the college football world, because it's a wild one. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the season with your son. That's gotta be looking forward to it.
I can't wait. It's going to be a great year.
Thanks, my friend. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Corey.
Have a good day. See you, buddy. Bye.